Welcome to another episode of Marketing Tips for Doctors. I'm your host, Dr. Barbara Hales. Today, we have with us Mickie Kennedy. Mickie Kennedy is an expert at helping small businesses, authors, and startups increase their visibility and credibility. Mickie founded eReleases 22 plus years ago after realizing that small businesses desperately need a press release service they can actually afford, giving them access to the media and to a national newswire, all with a personal touch. Mickie lives in Baltimore County, Maryland. Welcome to the show, Mickie.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Mickie, a lot of people, think that they know what press releases are, but how do they work?
Right. So press release is generally just an announcement to the media. It's usually in the third person. You might have an interesting quote in there where you put in quotes, of course. The most important aspect of a press release, of course, is the headline, because especially if it goes out over a newswire, that's generally the way it's broadcast. You drill down from the headline, and usually the headlines are arranged by industry feeds and things like that. So the distribution that eReleases does is through email to journalists who would be a good fit for it, but we also do the distribution through a newswire. And some people have familiar with a newswire, they think of AP or UPI or Reuters, and those are newswires that write everything that appears on them. They license their content to like newspapers and websites and things like that. So that's how they work. They will take a press release, but they'll never run a press release. They will rewrite it so that they control the copyright and information that way. The newswires of press releases, there's PR Newswire is the oldest and largest, and that's who we work with. There's also Business Wire and Globe Newswire, predominantly in the US.
You mentioned just now about the newswires that take a look at the press releases, but then rewrite them. As a person submitting a press release, would you have to pay them to rewrite it?
No, they are acting just as journalists. The goal of a press release is to have it turned into an article. And for the AP, Reuters, and UPI, those types of wires, the way they work is they write an article, and rather than a newspaper, like your local newspaper, paying someone to write all of these articles, they just license it. So instead of, having one writer that might do 6 articles a day, you can afford with the same, budget to have like 30 articles because you're licensing it from a source like that. They mostly are just rewriting articles that are of general interest for the most part. They might be breaking news. They might be more national or international in nature. Most of your local journalists will predominantly write about stuff that's more specific to you, for which there is no place to get that through a wire. So they're more local specific, more if your industry is really big on a particular topic, you might see articles that revolve around that a little bit more. So they sort of tailor it and supplement when it comes to the national, the breaking news, and the international.
There are probably few things that are more frustrating than to write a press release that you think is something that a lot of people would be interested in, and the media just doesn't think so, and it doesn't get run. So how do you recommend writing a press release that the media would want to develop and, blast out?
Right. So I always say, envision the press release as, content. And would this be of interest to a journalist audience? The journalist's job is to act as a gatekeeper. And so they're trying to curate content that they feel their audience is going to be interested in. So you might feel that what you're announcing is very important to you, but would it be important to the audience? And if not, could you make it more interesting to the audience? Is there a different angle that you could take, or is there content that you could add that would make it more relevant to an audience? I always say, try to reverse engineer from the perspective of an audience member what you're writing, and try to make it as captivating or interesting to them, and you'll have a better response from journalists looking at your release and turning it into hopefully an article or several.
So on the flip side, why do so many press releases fail?
I think it's the subject matter. It's rarely the writing of the press release. They're very simplistic for the most part. I used to think that the more perfect the press release, the better your chances. And I don't think that anymore. I think that your effort and resources and creativity should go into what it is that you're announcing. That is where most press releases fail. A lot of press releases are personnel changes, a relaunch of your product, version 2.7 or something like that. I even see press releases that a website's now mobile responsive. And that rarely is news that's worthy of being turned into an article for most people. Of course, if you have a major personnel change where you've got someone that's really lauded in the industry and a lot of people, are going to be interested in that, certainly do a press release on that. But for most personnel changes, you would be better off just taking that press release or that announcement and sending it directly to your local newspaper or your local business news publications, if you're lucky enough to have one, and also to maybe a couple of key trade publications. By reaching out to just 3 or 4 people yourself, you're going to have probably just as good odds as sending it out through a wire, because very few people are interested in those types of press releases.
Well, how do you get free local media coverage for yourself?
Yeah, local media is the easiest media for anyone to get. And I always tell people who, come to eReleases looking for that to just do it themselves. If you think about it, there's probably less than 10 people in your local area that would write about you. There might be a person at your local paper. If you have a business magazine or a business newspaper, probably one person there. Do your research, see who generally writes about businesses like me or my profession. And then, reach out to the outlet and ask for their email address. They'll give it to you. It's not a magic thing or a firewall that they're trying to prevent you. Journalists are very accessible because they want stories. They want to be accessible so that they can, get that breaking news or that really hot story. If you are, you might have minor papers or weekly community papers. Those could be a good outlet locally. There might be radio and TV programs that occasionally spotlight organizations or individuals on a particular topic. So again, do your research. At the radio and TV, it's usually not the host that you'd want to reach out to, but the producer or the booker of a particular show. So again, you'd call and just ask for their email address. And then once you have a Rolodex of generally less than 10 people, you would just email them naturally as you have milestones and things that you want to announce. Try to be a little more strategic, but a good way to do this is look up Google alerts of your profession and maybe people in other cities, and when you see them in an article, you can then pitch a similar article to your local media. You wouldn't tell them, hey, I saw this somewhere else, we should steal it and use it. But what you'd say is, I've noticed that doctors who volunteer, in Latin America have gotten some coverage in the past in other publications. And I feel like I would be a really, great fit here and to discuss the initiative that I'm doing. And this is what we're doing that's really positive. And, you don't even have to write a press release in these instances. You're just pitching the story. I do say that if you have a really compelling quote, go ahead and include that, because a lot of times a journalist will look at a story idea and say, that's okay, it's not great. But then if you have a really fantastic quote, they'll say, I could see myself building an entire story around that quote, because that quote is so great and compelling. And what makes a great quote is just something that cannot easily be paraphrased. You said it in a way that has a little song to it, or it just really, cuts to the matter in a way that's just, very strong. And often you can say something in the first person that you can't get away with in the third person. So, be willing to be emotional there, be willing to be emotionally charged. And, those are all ways, I think, in which you can elevate a quote that may be ho-hum into something that's a little more extraordinary.
That's really a great tip. Now, there is something that I'm wondering about, and that is in the past, some marketers put out press releases for professionals with just staff changes or new techniques that they were doing that probably would not be of much interest to the general public, but they do it so that their rankings are higher on the search engine pages. Are there still sites where you can do these press releases where you don't really care how many people are looking at it? You just want the search engines to see it?
Right. I don't think that press releases in and of themselves do much for SEO. That being said, if you do a press release and then you get a dozen articles written about it, those articles are unique and original content, and they're usually really good sources. They're members of the media. So that does help your SEO. But the syndicating of press releases, there used to be this practice where you'd send a release and you get a couple hundred links. Sometimes you could put as seen on NBC, ABC, these little affiliates and things like that. And, people still do that, but it doesn't really help you from an SEO standpoint. It might help you from a little credibility standpoint, but my goal with eReleases is to really try to get original content. We're looking for original articles, CNN covering you in an article, New York Times, as well as like maybe local media as well, if it's a release that can stand the test of going out nationally as well. And I always say, if there's things that you can do to make your release more strategic, include facts and figures. There's a lot of numbers out there and they can really help ground a press release. You may want to consider putting together a small survey or study in your industry, and that is generally considered pretty newsworthy, and people cover that as well. So, I've helped a lot of clients do that who consider themselves completely non-newsworthy. And I'm like, well, a survey or study is a great way to get out there and to get some media pickup. Generally, with a good survey, you're looking at 8 to 16 articles that are written about you. I've seen a fewer than that. I've seen considerably more, but that's usually the standard of what we see. And you can just use a service like SurveyMonkey that makes it very easy to build it and then collect the results. I would always advise to include questions that are really relevant right now. So if you can take the temperature on your industry right now, that's really important. During this entire pandemic and the unknown that lies ahead of us, a lot of people are interested in what people are feeling and where they're spending their dollars right now. So if you can take your temperature on your industry right now, are they hiring? Are they not hiring? Have they curtailed marketing? Have they increased marketing? Those are all things that right now would be really relevant in a survey or study, and anyone can do that. Some of my clients are like, well, I don't know who to send the survey to. So if you don't have a ready-made audience for it, let's say you're wanting to get other doctors in your profession, just reach out to a trade association. The smaller and the independent ones generally are more responsive to this, and ask if they'll send the survey to their members. You'd be surprised how many will just email it and share on social media a survey. You may want to mention that you'll include them in the press release that you're doing. The small and independent trade associations don't get a lot of love. So if you're willing to publicize them a little bit, they see it as a win-win. And it also might help boost your credibility as well when you are actually publishing the results of the survey. Another thing you may want to consider is throwing in 1 or 2 left field questions, because sometimes the results from those can be really interesting. They may not be statistically relevant, but we've had an auto repair shop in Pennsylvania survey independent auto shops across the US, and they just had a field that was room for a couple sentences saying, what's the strangest thing a customer left in your car? And when we did the press release, we mentioned a roundup of, I think we collected 60 some interesting little anecdotes there. And those were the ones that went viral. People really found those fascinating, these strange, odd little things that were left. Boa constrictors, grandma left in an urn and they had to retrieve her from a memorial in the midst of a repair. And you can see the human interest quality of that. We love stories. We love things like that. So it really resonated. Now, they had a lot of other good results in the survey that were interesting, but it was definitely those that made that survey and study go viral. And there's no reason you can't do it yourself. A lot of people are like, well, I'm just one person. I'm not an industry expert. And believe it or not, the people who are industry experts, when they started, they were in the same boat. They just put themselves out there and shared their findings, their opinions, and that's how they got started. So I encourage anybody to sort of claim a little bit of the news that's out there available for you, and that's a really great way to do it. And even if you don't do your own survey, I find taking statistics that are just publicly available or maybe a little hidden in your industry and bringing them to light in context to what you're announcing can also really enhance it and improve your chances of media pickup.
Well, what fun and really great advice. PRWeb, who I guess may be one of your competitors, does offer, a package where people could, pay for a certain number of press releases. But of course, that doesn't necessarily always translate to, like great earth-shattering news that that they would be putting out. Do you work the same way, or you really are strictly helping people put out newsworthy articles?
No, we just pay, have a service where you pay per press release, and you can lean on us and chat with our editors or give us a call. We don't have any salespeople, and we'll walk you through the process. We'll review a press release if you have one ready. The company that you mentioned, PRWeb, we actually work with their parent company. PRWeb is an online visibility service. It doesn't reach journalists. So it's one of those services that sort of syndicates you to a few websites. You're available in the search engines, but it does not reach the media directly. Cision, which owns PRWeb, also owns PR Newswire, and we work with PR Newswire. They are a service that goes directly, feeds directly to newsrooms and goes directly to journalists. So that's a big difference between the two services. A lot of people who use PRWeb have the assumption that they can get media pickup, and occasionally I've seen a media outlet or two pick up something that from PRWeb, but it's not. If you're not reaching the journalist directly, your chances of pickup is much, much lower. It's really designed for that online visibility, which I think isn't really important as much these days. And I think that, the goal being to get articles, you definitely want to have that connection and reach the journalist directly.
Well, something very exciting for our listeners is to know that you have created a free video masterclass on how to create a winning PR strategy. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So basically, I put together a video. It's a little less than an hour. It's very accessible to anyone. And it's basically designed to do an audit of you, your business, what you're about, in the eyes of what could be really newsworthy. And I took several examples and strategies that my clients use with success and bring them down to how they might apply to your business. And so if you were to take advantage of that, I'm pretty sure you could build out a PR campaign of 4 to 6 releases that are strategically more important than the average press release. And it's available at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. It's completely free. I'm trying to get my customers to take it so they start doing more strategic press releases. They have better results. And I stopped seeing so many press releases about, Alice in HR who's gone from associate to administrative HR assistant or something like that. Those releases are fine, but I hate people paying money for those because I know that they're not going to get pickup. And with the same amount of money and capital you're investing, you could do something a little more interesting and have the chance of getting real media pickup.
Well, I will be putting the link in our show notes. So for all those people that say, wait, what did he say? What did he say? You will easily be able to see it in our show notes and then just click on it. It seems like a really valuable resource. I strongly recommend listeners that you go and check it out. And I can tell you, I'm going to. So, that being a little piece of advice, I'm going to do it. I suggest that you do it too. Well, thank you so much for being on our show today. This has been another episode of Marketing Tips for Doctors with your host, Dr. Barbara Hales. Till next time.